Hello everybody and welcome back to the Beads of Paradise NYC YouTube channel. A few weeks ago I showed you a very basic wire wrap when we took a head pin, we took a bead, and we created a little wire wrapped pendant. And you could take this and put it on a necklace, on a chain, you could put it on a little earring hook and make an earring out of it. It's a very simple way to start wire wrapping and you could do a whole lot with it. Now today we're going to step that up a notch and do what I have mentioned last week is calling it a figure 8 wire wrap, but I'm going to broaden that today to just basically double wire wrapping because there's a few different variations we can take on that theme that really step up your game in terms of making jewelry, and it's really versatile. So doing that double figure 8 wire wrap is how I essentially made my earring here and my necklace here, where I created double figure 8s on each side of the bead, so there's a bead in between there to create sort of this chain-linked dropped effect. You could also use that double figure 8 shape. I'm going to show you an example of that again, as I did in my last video where I created sort of a connector piece with it, and that's another excellent way to use that figure 8 style. Another way to use sort of a variation of the double wire wrap is how to wire wrap a teardrop pendant, which is drilled anything that is drilled, like from side to side. You have to work around that in a little bit of a different way. So I'm going to show you a few different examples. So first things first, let's start with supplies and the tools you're going to need to use. So just like with regular wrapping, you're going to need your cutters, you're going to need flat nose or chain nose pliers, and you're going to need round nose pliers. And with the basic wire wrapping, we use basically head pins, eye pins, ball pins, and that's usually what all the bottom of my earrings are made with. And that's when you want to create just like a single little loop. So you might need some of those when you're doing like more extended projects, like, you know, this earring with the double wire wrapping. But mostly you're going to be working with like a spool of wire where you cut a few inches off. Now we sell base metal wire, that's what I'm using today. By the spool, and we'll also sell it by the inch, and we also sell gold fill and sterling silver wires. So where I'm going to start today is essentially creating something very similar to my earring here, so you could get an idea of how these things are looped together. But that same concept, that same wire wrapping process is exactly how my necklace was created. It just sort of just kept on going. So I'm going to start showing you how to do the basic figure 8 wire wrap with the bead in the center, because that's probably where you're going to use it the most if you're curious about this. So first thing I'm going to do is going to cut off a piece of wire, and I'm just going to eyeball it, but when you're cutting this, you're going to want to take into account the size of your bead, the skill of your wire wrapping. So you might want to leave yourself a little bit of extra room if you're still pretty new to it. If you're feeling really conservative and tight and skilled with it, you might be able to get away with using a little bit less. So I'm just going to eyeball a little piece of wire here. And because I'm going to be using this bead, I think this is a decent amount to get a little loop, put on the bead, and then do another one. So for my starter, I'm just going to I'm doing slightly lazy wire wraps here just to give you the idea of how this goes. But for my first one, my very first of my chain linked group, I'm just going to start out with a loop. So remember, we're creating a circle by using our round nose pliers to create a loop, winding the wire around the base, cutting it, and then we are perfecting it by squishing in any wonky bits. And if you need a refresher on this, I'm going to put a little link up here so you can go back to our basic wire wrapping skills where I cover this much more in depth. So for the beginning, from that very first step, we have a loop and we have a little space of wire here. So then the next thing I'm going to do is put on my bead that's going to be going in the center of that figure 8 wire wrap. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the top here. So I'm going to then create a loop. Now I'm going to wind it around. and give it a snip, and then press that wonky wire bits in. And sometimes your loops aren't perfectly straight. If there's anything weird like that, remember, this wire is pliable. You're the boss of it. It's not the boss of you. And you could straighten any wonky bits up. So there, from our very first wire wrap bit, you could see you have your bead and then you have 2 loops on each side. And that is a very basic step. So from this, you could in theory have attached it to a chain and just have a suspended bead here. So you'll see a lot of that in jewelry making, where there's just a bead suspended on a chain, on a cord where it's tied on both sides. So that is a sort of basic look at how you would get that effect just from this little wire wrapping. But for today, we're going to show you how to connect these together. So again, I'm going to take my wire, I'm going to snip off a piece, and this next step I'm going to show you is a very helpful thing just when you're putting jewelry together itself. So again, I'm going to create my first little loop here. And because I'm going to be attaching this to another piece, I don't want to do this the second wire wrap here. So I have this loop here. And before I wrap it is when I'm going to insert it into my piece that is already wire wrapped. And you do the same thing if you're going to be attaching this to a piece of chain, to a piece of cord. Before you close it, before you do the wire wrap, you want to attach it to whatever it's going to be attached to. So once I have that there, and yeah, it makes it a little bit more awkward to wire wrap, but I'm still going to grab that little circle, that loop that I just made, and then I'm going to wind my wire around and cut off the excess. So you can sort of see it starting to come together now. You see how it's creating sort of a chain link effect. So you have that dangle here, then I'm going to drop on another bead like so, and then do the same exact thing where I create my little circle. Remember, you're using your round nose pliers as a mold to sort of create that circle effect. So we do that, give it a little snip. I think I'm going to do one more little drop. So see, now we have 2 little dangles. And so to create another, I'm going to cut off another little piece of wire. Do the same thing once again where I create my loop. And remember, we're going to stop right here and first attach it to our second wire wrapped piece. Remember, we're creating a chain linked effect, so you need to connect them before we do the wire wrapping. So then I'm going to hold that loop that I just worked so very hard to make, and I'm going to attach, wrap my wire, snip that excess off, and then drop my bead on. And see, I think 3 dangles is enough. And then I want to attach this little yellow bead hanging from the bottom, just for kicks. Usually I would do that first, where I would do this one and then start building this on top of it. But for the sake of this, I just want you to see how this sort of goes along. And you could do this indefinitely. While I'm making like a few dropped earrings today, you could sort of keep going on and create a whole necklace. You could create a bracelet, you could create waist beads, you could create an anklet, all by just wire wrapping your beads together. It could be a really beautiful effect. So we're going to work a little bit differently here. And I got my little wire wrap here. And because I'm inserting this bead onto it, I'm going to thread this through, because this one is already wire wrapped, thread this through there. So right now you can see that it's sort of dangling. It still needs to be wire wrapped, but we threaded it through before we did the wire wrap. And then I'm going to take that little loop there and wind it around. And then give it a little snip. Press in any wonky bits. Because I'm going to call this an earring, the next thing we're going to do is attach it to my little earring hook. So again, this opens up like a whole lot of things. You just sort of twist open that little opening right there. Pull it through. Pull it back closed. And voila, you have an earring. So I'm going to wear that. I'm going to switch this one out. And voila, we have a multi-wire wrapped dangly earring. Kind of fun, right? So next I'm going to show you how to wire wrap on a briolette or a teardrop shaped bead where the hole is drilled horizontally. And you could use the same concept for any bead that is drilled horizontally, even if it's a big nugget that is in theory drilled from top to bottom, but that you want to sit this way instead and to dangle from the top. So I'm going to take a piece of wire, and if you're new to this, you're going to want to use a little bit extra wire, and I'm going to leave one end a little bit longer. And then I'm going to take my fingers and gently sort of pull the wire so that it sits sort of in a triangular shape that it sort of follows the shape of your bead. And then I'm going to either take my fingers, or you could use a tool if that helps you more, and sort of give the wire a little bend so that it's pretty much flat right at the sort of point of your bead. Or if you were doing it with an oblong bead and sort of pulling it up to the center so that it dangles, you'd want to pull it towards the center. And then I'm going to take my fingers and take this shorter wire and sort of wrap it around the base. And you could use your fingers, and you want to be very careful because you want to make sure that you're not leaving either a huge amount of space on top of your bead or crushing your bead by wrapping it too tightly so that it doesn't hang very nicely. And I'm doing a very simple wrap here. Some people create like nice little caps on top of their teardrop shape, but I'm just going to do a very simple example. And I'm going to give that a snip. And so then this again looks basically just like a head pin, like any pin, any basic wire thing you would wire wrap with. So we have this little wire here, and this is where I'm going to create the loop that this is going to dangle from. So I'm going to imagine this is going on a chain, so I'm going to be creating a fairly small loop here. And remember, you could use your round nose plier to sort of create a larger or smaller hole depending on the size that you need. So now I'm going to wind my wire so that it touches the original wire so that they meet at the center, ideally. This one's a little bit harder since I'm holding it in front of the camera, so it's probably not my most perfect example, but it gives you the idea for what you do here. So now you have a little teardrop pendant that you can put through a piece of chain. Alright, so next up I'm going to show you how you could use that sort of figure-8 wire wrap with just the wire to sort of repair a broken chain. And that will show you a little bit how you use that wire wrap. In general, that double figure-8 as a connector piece. So again, I'm starting out with a little piece of wire, and I'm using a slightly thicker wire than I would probably ideally use for working with such a delicate chain. But I'm starting out just like I did before where I'm creating my loop. And since I'm putting it into a chain, I'm going to try to wriggle this as small as I can. And depending on your project, you may not need to do this part. But so then to attach it to the chain, and while we're using this to connect those two pieces, this is the same way you would attach something to it if you were creating one of these sort of wire-wrapped pieces where then there was a center bead wire-wrapped on each side and then it was attached to a chain. So I have that first little wire wrap. Just going to wrap that right around the base. Give it a little snip. And so then I'm going to do the same thing on the top. So instead of putting a bead on here, I'm just going to be doing a figure 8 with the wire by itself. So I'm using the figure 8 in this point as a connector. So again, I'm just going to do the same thing where I create a loop. I pull the wire here. And then since I'm attaching it to chain at this point, and you could also do this to attach a clasp. So at this point, instead of inserting the chain here, you could insert a clasp, you can insert a bead, or I mean another wire-wrapped piece to it. So we inserted our chain like so. And then I'm going to hold again that loop and wrap this so that it meets in the center. Then press in any wonky bits. And again, I would ideally use like a much thinner wire to do this, but this way you could sort of see where I'm going a little bit more. But that is a very handy way to use that sort of figure 8 shape right here. So you see a loop and then the two sets of wire wrappings that meet there. And this is a handy way to repair chains that are broken, wire wrap a clasp onto a piece, and I'm going to show you this necklace that is all wire wrapped together. So you could see how all of the wire wrapping techniques sort of come into play here. So you see all of these are wire wrapped individually. Some of them have more than one bead on it, like, where is it? This one. Most of them are singular, and then it is just wire wrapped to this chain that creates sort of an extender piece. So I could wear it as a very short choker or as a longer piece. And then I did very simple wire wraps here to create little dangly bits. So the basic idea here is that once you have wire wrapping down, it's really just something you could practice, play with, have fun with, and you could do so much with it. I hope you guys learned something today. I hope you enjoyed it. And head over to our website where you can buy all of these supplies. I'm going to leave any notes that I can in the description. If you enjoy our videos, please hit subscribe. And we'll look forward to seeing you next time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.